For those of you I haven't met, I'm Mike Lawson. I'm this year's chair of the select board. And so what we'll do is normal procedures is around the room and hear what's going on in your world. Let me say, before we do that though, at this time of the year, there's a lot of change in committees, new chairs, new members. And if you're not fully staffed, and I should, having just said that, remind you that this meeting is being recorded. If you're not fully staffed up and you're missing people, please be in touch with the select board liaison. And the two of you can try to figure out who might be good members to join your committee. If you email Andrew in the town manager's office, he can tell you what green cards have already been submitted. So just please let us know if you need somebody to be on your committee. All right.
Oh, you committed to that.
So we had a bet about which way you go. I'll be very, very short. I'm Jim Smith. I'm the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're very, very happy about the fact that we've finally close to full membership, and now John Brady's going to be coming off at the end of May, so we're still looking on that. But I would say that we proceed at pace. It's a committee that benefits hugely from the wonderful committees that we work with, primarily the planning board, but also other committees like the Board of Health and others who provide us really wonderful reports. And by the time controversial items get to us, they're no longer controversial as far as I can tell. Cafe Nero being a perfect example of really great cooperation in town. It was very controversial. They had all sorts of things going on. The planning board spent lots and lots of time. By the time we got there, everybody was very, very happy, in terms of what we saw, at least in our public hearing. I'm not saying the whole town was happy, but everybody was happy in our public hearing, and I think that's exactly the way the process should work. So we tend to be an adjudicatory body. We do our thing, but we truly appreciate the staff and the other boards to make our life very easy. So that's all important.
Thank you, Jim.
Can I, before Carl, you begin, Aaron Stevens, who's in charge of our audio system, has surveyed these mics and found that the great majority of them are very unsensitive. And she found that for the majority of them, you really have to be very close to them in order to be heard. And I'm dependent on it, and I'm sort of canary in the coal mine to the people who are watching on the system. So,
Okay, so did you hear me or not?
I could hear you just because of our proximity,
Okay. But otherwise.
Just pull them in close. It looks like folks over there are going to have to share when it gets around.
Thank you. Tom, thank you for those comments. I appreciate that, because as chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee, I'm always sensitive to complaints about not being heard. So yes, always keep the microphone as close as you can. Even though we can hear it in the room here, sometimes the people who are doing the recording have trouble mixing the volumes as people's voices changes. For my committee, we will have one vacancy at the end of this term. And tonight, our next meeting is not today as we normally follow Chair's Breakfast, but it'll be next week in the evening at the CCH studio at the high school. So that'll be our first meeting at night, and the first meeting at the studio itself. Again, it is noticed up, and it is an open meeting. On the PEG schedule, we are closing out our survey, our customer survey, asking for input on what people want to see in PEG preferences, what they want to see on channels 8, 9, and 99. I think today, the 15th, is the last day for those responses. And if you still want to file a response, you can do it online by Googling, or not by inserting in the search bar on the town's search bar from the homepage, PEG, P-E-G, survey. And that'll lead you right to it, and you can fill it in online and ship it off. And then the other last thing I wanted to mention is that one of the things we'll be looking forward going forward with the PEG committee is exploring the possibility of videotaping not just things in this room or in the townhouse, but also perhaps at Kai's Road and at Harvey Wheeler, trying to expand the areas where the committees can be seen remotely as well. And I must let you know, if anyone has a problem with having the committee of videotape, come talk to me about it. We'll see what we can work out. Okay? And that's my report. Thank you.
Why don't we slide up?
Oh,
You're-
jumping around.
Well, you were sitting over there.
Brian Folds, I'm the Climate Action Advisory Board. We're a new board, and we have completed about half a year's worth of time towards our efforts. So we've had a few members renew and continue on the board, and I think we have one vacancy. I'm filling in for Nick Pappas. Nick, I believe, will be stepping off, and we have not selected a chair, and he's asked me to fill in. So
So you have a vacancy then?
I believe we do, yes. And the other, what we're working on is we've done a greenhouse gas inventory of the town. We've done a wedge analysis to find out what we could do with the largest impact on that. And now we're developing a climate action plan as the next focus, which will give us a roadmap to how the town can transition to that 80% reduction target that we have.
I asked you to come sit there because you're next.
We're jumping around.
No, we're going back. You're better be there.
Well, Tax Fairness Committee, we are in the process of trying to keep and possibly improve the senior exemption that we put into place about a year ago. Turns out there are a number of complications that we have to work through. One thing that the town assessors pointed out is our criteria and circuit breaker criteria don't match. So we have a number of applicants who are not eligible for the circuit breaker because their houses are worth too much. But we still use the circuit breaker calculations for their income. And these are extremely complicated, and he's asked for some relief from this. So that's one of the things we're in. Because they're so complicated, it's a bit to work through. But
The punchline is you're hoping to submit.
we hope to submit a request to the select board at our next meeting.
24th.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Happy Gother from the Concord Ag Committee. We just wrapped up our spring forum, which was held at Harvey Wheeler, and it was hosted to the restaurants in town with chefs who participated in a panel talking about food preparation and how they would envision using local produce and what's available. We're now involved in preparing for Ag Day, which is September 14th. And the Garden Club will also have their tours that afternoon. So we have a busy summer with trying to get caught up with all this rain and mud and varmints infesting the greenhouses as the plants are waiting to go out.
Excellent. Please.
Hi, Peter Nobley. I'm with the Historic Districts Commission. I think a short report on the docket these days. The library expansion project is causing is probably the wrong word, but creating a great deal of conversation about the. I don't know if you're aware of the large addition renovation happening there. So actually, the next public hearing on that will be June 20th. They've gone back and redrawn that project, so we'll see what they come back with. We've got a big project going on across the street here. Holy Family Parish is putting a big addition onto the back of the old rectory there, and I think that's coming for approval tonight. And a couple of things we're working on. We're looking at updating our guidelines on street furniture and signage in the historic districts. We've had a number of issues come up, especially right down here on the Main Street district. And we're looking to create a large project review process so that the library isn't the same review process as somebody who wants to change the paint color of their front door, which is essentially what's happening right now, which is an inefficient process, especially for large projects. And we've had one last thing is some conversation about the creation of what are called neighborhood conservation districts, as opposed to formal historic districts. And I know, Matt, you've asked about that. So we're reviewing those guidelines from Wellesley. Actually, they've got a number of neighborhood conservation districts. So we'll be briefing you on that soon, I think.
Well, Peter, what is that?
So a neighborhood conservation district, rather than go the formal, to establish an historic district, it has to be a majority of residents, go to town meeting. A conservation district is more of a, it's something the committee, the Historic Districts Commission can recommend to the town, and it's essentially an agreement within the neighborhood to do certain things in terms of construction and renovation projects. And
Restrictions on what can happen.
That's right, but they're not binding. So unlike in the historic districts, it's a series of recommendations. But in Wellesley, it has helped several neighborhoods preserve their character without having to become formally a historic district. And we've had a number of neighborhoods approach us about, can we become a historic district? And at the moment, we've had to say no, because they don't have a majority of residents who'd like to become a district. So I think we'll brief your group, Matt, and then maybe we can talk about it as a town further.
And is the planning board looking at this too?
Well, we have discussed the possibility, but we have higher priority issues at hand. And so I'm thrilled that another committee is looking at this, so that, if there's action that is required by our board, that we can consider it. But we just don't have the horsepower right now to look at that in light of the other activities we have.
Peter, are you fully staffed?
Yes, we're fully staffed right now.
I didn't ask, but the ag committee, are you guys?
I think so.
Huh?
And yes.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Deb Green. I'm the new chair of the Board of Health. The bulk of our most recent meeting was spent discussing possible changes to the town's existing tobacco and nicotine product regulations. And to assist us, we had two guests in our most recent meeting. One you well know, Dr. Alan Woodward, who's former Board of Health chair and works in public health and the Massachusetts anti-tobacco movement. And the other guest we had was a senior staff attorney from Northeastern University School of Law named Chris Banthan, who is with the Public Health Advisory Institute there. And so just to put it in context, we, in Concord have a fairly low combustible tobacco use rate, about 8%, but the vaping use, especially in the high schools, has just skyrocketed. So it is, really thought to be an epidemic across the country. And while Concord Carla has about a 24% vaping use rate, some schools in other areas are reporting about a 70% vaping rate. And it's more than just, a nuisance in the schools with kids, using these products. The health concern is that the dose of nicotine in these products is 20 to 30 times as high as in a combustible regular tobacco. So, so obviously in the back of our mind is trying to get these vaping devices and products out of the hands of adolescents and out of the schools. And then there have been recent studies coming out that show that the number one flavor that kids vape is actually menthol. I mean, there's over 8,000 flavors of these vaping devices, but the number one flavor is mint. And then the number one combustible tobacco, regular cigarette flavor, is also menthol as well. And as you probably are well aware, Concord years ago banned flavored tobacco products. So you cannot buy raspberry cigars in Concord. So you cannot buy flavored, Jewel pods or whatever here. However, we have left the mint products allowed in town. So other towns are sort of similar, facing similar issues and discussions. Towns like Needham are working to sort of get menthol out of their regular stores. So we're in the process of discussing all this and figuring out what the next step would be. The other good news is that Susan Rask, our public health director for our town, worked very hard and was able to, with another town, and we have a $25,000 grant that'll address vaping and substance abuse and education in Concord, Carlisle, and Lincoln. And so this will, focus on education and outreach and also provide money for some vaping detection devices in the bathrooms in the high school. So those should probably go in the fall, and we'll see how well they work. We really don't know. It's not like cigarette smoke, which is sort of, transmit into the air. Kids can sort of vape into their sweatshirt and stuff. So we'll see. I have, on a separate issue, I've been appointed to a task force with the high school and 4 other towns to address mental health gaps for adolescents and suicide prevention. So that will be starting up in the summer. And lastly, Ray Considine, Board of Health, is working with Select Board member Linda Escobedo about the 5G wireless and the health implications of the next generation wireless communications and sort of, the health and safety issues there. So that is it.
Doctor, I want to be sure I understood you correctly. Concord bans the sale of flavored tobacco and vaping products? Is that?
You cannot buy flavored tobacco products.
But menthol is not covered by that ban?
And
menthol is the most popular?
Yes, so it's very interesting. The studies are now showing that menthol is,
Why that exception? Why, if it's flavored?
Yeah, I don't know why that was.
Well, there were menthol cigarettes, right? There've been menthol cigarettes since the dawn of time.
So menthol, blunts the sort of taste of and the smell of combustible tobacco. So it's often makes, new users to tobacco, it's more palatable for them. So, but, I think that these studies weren't available, years ago when we first moved to ban the flavored products. So it's new information.
How much of an effort would it be to extend the ban to menthol?
Well, we are looking at different approaches, keeping in mind that we, would not want to be sued by, business owners and tobacco industry. I think we are looking to see what other towns have done, like Needham has, banned all flavored tobacco, all flavored, including menthol, and put those in stores that are only adult-only stores, so 21 plus. So Concord actually doesn't have any sort of adult-only retail stores that they could probably pop up if we did that. So, and Somerville did something a little bit different, but they are probably facing legislation. They are, because they are not moving the combustible tobacco products into 21 plus stores. So they are facing litigation really because they're sort of being biased against the e-cigarettes and not the combustible products, which actually kill more people. So, we're going to be working closely with Northeastern for legal advice and trying to take steps to ultimately get, it would be nice to get all the vaping devices, even the actual, not just the cartridges, but the actual, initial, whatever you call them, devices, into 21 plus stores so that they can't get these things.
With the the chair's indulgence, I have one other question. And that is, are there any pathological consequences to the 20 to 30 times stronger dose of nicotine in vaping products versus combustibles?
For adolescents, yes, nicotine is well known to cause changes in adolescent brain development, and so I could talk for a long time about that. But briefly, the answer to your question is yes. It's a powerfully addictive substance, and pediatricians are not equipped. There's just no literature to figure out for them to know how to get kids off this stuff. So it's really just a lot of new frontier in medicine. But yes, nicotine is very damaging to the adolescent brain, and so to have them have access to products that are much stronger than combustible tobacco is very concerning.
One of the issues is because it's much more powerful in terms of the dosage of nicotine, you're using it more often.
Yeah, it's quickly addictive.
Up to the
Yep.
needing to use the product.
Yeah,
Amazing frequency.
amazing frequency. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So if we ban, because menthol is allowed currently, but if we
Yes.
ban all flavors of both e-cigarettes and the combustibles, is that not essentially a ban on all e-cigarettes? Because I don't.
There are plain
There are plain-
tobacco flavored
Okay.
e-cigarettes. There is a plain tobacco.
Never heard of it. All right.
I know.
I only hear about the flavored ones.
Yeah,
so.
the flavors are much more enticing.
Well,
Yeah, for sure.
I think you can detect there's a lot of interest in this subject, just from the questions that were asked here. I hope you would, the board would keep folks informed
Yes.
as we progress here, so that whatever you do, we can sort of build sort of awareness of what's going on
Yeah,
over the town.
absolutely. We'll
Yeah.
keep everyone informed.
Great. Thank you very much.
I'm Mav Pardee. I'm from the Library Committee. We have a couple of things going on. The major one being the expansion of the library. And as you just heard, we've been before the Historic Districts Commission twice, and there will be a public hearing on June 20th. I think at the last meeting, I thanked you all for the fact that town meeting voted the very generous $1,050,000 to support that project. So in case I didn't do it last time, thank you. We're in the middle of starting another long-range planning process for the library, since we had a plan that was from 2016 to 2020, but we have achieved all of those objectives. So we're starting another process and have hired a consultant named Jay Voigt, and that's going to happen on June 18th. It will be a community forum, and it's right now tentatively scheduled at Fowler Library, where there's a nice meeting space. We also have just started the Curator's Choice display in the upstairs gallery at the main library. You may know that Leslie Wilson, who's been the curator at the library for 23, maybe 25 years, is retiring. And we have amazing materials over there, and she's put together a display of favorite upstairs gallery, and it is really spectacular. The Friends book sale will take place on June 1st, unless it rains, in which case it will be June 8th. And this is my last meeting as chair. I will be stepping down as chair of the library at our meeting next week. We will have a new chair who will start coming. We have 2 vacancies on the library committee, but we have a number of green card holders who are coming to that meeting because we like to have them come and see what we're about before we submit names to the select board.
Thank you.
So, thanks.
Rick Eifler, Concord Housing Authority. We're also happy with the results of town meeting. We are in the process of working on the planning for the Giroux property that we'll be getting. We have a house at 365 Commonwealth already, and there's a little piece of the Giroux property that's right next to it, in case anybody isn't aware, that we'll be getting from the town. The town needs to work out just how to get us that property through subdivision, and disposition is also an issue. It has to be legally done properly to be approved as a transfer. So that may take some time, but we have a meeting set up with Marcia Rasmussen to sort of plan out how this thing might go. So that's our first step, is just kind of planning the process and seeing how the steps will go to get from where we are now to building a house there next to our other house. We have a full board. There's no vacancies on our board. So we're all set on that front. The other thing we will be probably working on a lot in the next year or so, we'll be working with HUD. We have 130 units in town. 18 of them are federally owned units. And I mentioned in one of the meetings here before that that HUD is in the process of trying to figure out what to do with their $50 billion backlog in improvements on their properties throughout the United States. And we're not a big piece of that, but we do. But we are a piece of the process they're hoping to do, which is dispose of a lot of their public housing and get them into other programs. And the strategy for our units would probably be, they have a streamlined process for housing authorities that have less than 50 units. And since we have only 18, we would qualify for that. So we will be coming up with a plan for what to do with our 18 federal units to transfer them, convert them from public housing, traditional public housing, where HUD has a controlling interest in the property through their declaration of trust that's on the property, established years in 1950 or whenever this was first done. And transferring them from that program to more of a local initiative program. So we'd be working with Liz Rust and the regional authority to figure out how to do that, what program to use to do that. But chances are they would, and how to protect the tenants in that process. So that's all covered under Section 18. So, but it's working with the federal government on figuring out how to do this will probably be many months of work, and then actually going through the process will probably be many years. So this will be a long, drawn-out process, but hopefully going somewhere. Yeah. So that's what
Matt Johnson with the Planning Board, standing in for Gary Kleiman, who is actually rolling off at the end of this month. We also have another member, Robert Easton, who is leaving at the end of this month. His term's completing. So we have one new member that's already signed up, but we're still looking for another. Now, as far as what's going on with us, we have our major initiative for this year is housing choice, basically enhancing housing choice in Concord, especially sort of for moderate affordable housing, and make it a more of a market-driven approach for that echelon of housing. I mean, there's all kinds of issues with subsidizing that moderate affordable housing. We looked at a wide variety of possibilities that were proposed in the comprehensive long-range plan, and we prioritized 4 different initiatives for this year. So the one that's town-wide as a possibility is liberalizing the regulation of accessory units. So right now it's actually very difficult to establish an accessory unit within your home. But we see that as probably the most opportune type of option to offer. And so while there are a number of concerns that we need to address, we will look at trying to make it easier for people to create accessory units. The next 2 are related to village centers. So the idea would be to create kind of an overlay district, and what we've kind of nominally defined as half a mile from the village centers, which would be kind of walking distance. So we have to define what half a mile means. But then secondly, well, no, we'll draw a boundary that defines what we mean by that. But then within those boundaries, the two different initiatives would be, first of all, to allow two-family housing by right. So that's a pattern of housing that's been available in Concord, before zoning. It was pretty common. But once zoning got established, it was no longer allowed. And so you'll see lots of two families, but they're old two families.
I mean, recognizing zoning was 1928.
Yes, so, but we have a lot of housing stock, it's at least that old. Then the second would be to change some of the regulations for planned residential developments within that district. Basically to allow greater density, but also to make more walking, sort of pedestrian-friendly developments by restricting the number of garages, trying to encourage a pattern of use that is, likely to fit with our transit centers. And then also to further tighten the kind of environmental level of commitments that we would hope that developers would make to those developments. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at for the PRD. Then the final one is very specific to one area, which is we're currently working with MAPD to do a study of the Thoreau Depot area with an idea of maybe upzoning the area so that to either what they call 40R or transit-oriented development will allow a more intensive pattern of mixed-use development in that area. And the rationale there is, first of all, of course, the proximity of the commuter rail, but then secondly, that a lot of the commercial district really is in need of redevelopment. It's built around kind of an old strip mall, suburban model. And then that it's an area that's perhaps, while it's very adjacent to a lot of historic districts, is itself maybe a little less sensitive than the other areas in the center to new development. So it's a lot on our plate to try to work out what we will bring forward to town meeting to enable all of those things in the next year. What we need to be able to do, and what we've been working on now, is to figure out which other committees we need to talk to on which initiatives. And so we will be engaging with the public as well as with other town committees over the next few months so that we can bring the right set of things to bear.
Help one of the committees is you'll come talk to the select board so that we could hopefully get on the same page.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so again, even though we're investigating these four things, it doesn't mean that all of them will come to pass. It's just that these are the ones that the board members wanted to pursue. Yeah.
Well, if you've got a chance to study the Vision Concord, the long-range plan, it's very comprehensive. You should take a look at it. And there's lots and lots of stuff in there.
Yeah.
And many of the things that are in there transcend the boundaries of what any particular committee can worry about. And in addition to that, there are potential conflicts. This is a good idea, but it's going to bump into this and that kind of stuff. So I think as the various committees in town deal with the long-range plan and try to make progress, we really all need to make sure that, as Matt said, you're talking to the various committees so we don't get ourselves in a pickle according to the town with different proposals that seem at odds with one another. Yeah. So I think that's a good approach for all committees.
Matt, within the context of PRD, you mentioned the phrase environmental commitments and emphasizing what environmental...
Well, basically energy efficiency is the one that we're going to highlight. I mean, and also the use of electric source heating and cooling, just given the town's commitment to green energy. So But what we need to study further is that our regulations need to be consistent with the mass building code. So there are certain things that we can't regulate if the state has regulated them. So we have work to do there. Okay, so we've talked about establishing, for example, a minimum HERS rating for new construction in PRDs. Yeah.
And my committee can help with that.
Yeah, well, and we need the
That's what we do.
expertise, okay? We don't have the expertise.
Yes, and this is a broad offer, and the Climate Action Advisory Board is here to help other boards with any climate-related issues that could be, the electric infrastructure, how to put that in place. You talked about states and the code.
Yeah.
One of our efforts is to make sure Concord gives their opinion on the update of that code.
Yeah.
We're working towards those efforts, and we want to incorporate those ideas and aspirations into the climate action plan so that we can look forward. But again, sustainability very much at the beginning of the process.
Well, and
Of course,
to that point,
right.
probably the one immediate concern that we have, even before this, is what we're already doing, which is that we added sustainability criteria to our site plan review process a year plus ago. The problem is that we don't have specific criteria. So it's really whatever the developer says. They say, oh, we're using, high efficiency gas boilers. We're done. We're using double pane windows. We're done. We need to figure out how to raise the bar and yet be reasonable, with developers, and so that they're sort of forewarned and forearmed when they come in and present to us.
Our committee has a lot of professionals that work in those definitions. So.
I'm just gonna quickly add, unless you had a question for Matt.
I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
For Matt. Did you say at an earlier meeting that you had a project pending on Thoreau Street that the committee was looking at, a proposal?
Not on Thoreau Street. We have, there is a pending project on Main Street that we've been reviewing, though not much has happened lately. There's not much to report on in terms of projects in front of us. Two PRDs that had been proposed, one on Old Bedford Road, one on Main Street. They both came back with conceptual plans that were adjusting unit counts and other design elements. But then things have been quiet since then. We expect they'll come back.
Quickly.
Yeah, quickly, I was just going to say, Matt, that it would be great to schedule, I think, some time to have you or others on the board talk to us on the Zoning Board of Appeals, because we're going to be the enforcement guys on these at the end. So I think it'd be helpful to have some input at the beginning. I know it's 1928 is the zoning bylaw because we do deal with accessory units and two-family houses and all that sort of stuff. So I think that I think this is great, but I also think that it'd be useful to help on the enforcement side.
Well, if we had thrown out a couple other things like perhaps within a half mile reducing the minimum lot size, and what impact would that have on the ZBA? So we should talk.
Heighten the notion that we ought to talk to each other.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of overlap. Last question, we need to move on.
Mark Hanson, the Pollinator Committee. One of the things we're finding is that turf is generally adverse to pollinators, whereas if the landscaping of these more dense facilities, like the one up on River Street where they have I think it's up Riverwalk, it has a community garden as part of the development requirement.
Yeah.
Community gardens generally are organic and great sources for pollinators. Also, landscaping trees, soil choices can be very beneficial as well as shrubbery. So we'd be very interested if there's anything we can do to help.
There may be. So let's talk.
Happily, I don't have a whole lot to report. I will say that we extended the time for surveys to come back, reacting in particular to the use of electronic voting at town meeting this year. And we got a really good response online. So I'm still in the process of tabulating those, and I'm actually not sure where they come out, except that I did note that there was an overwhelming view that people disagreed with the statement and disagreed strongly with the statement that we should not use electronic voting under any circumstances. So now the question is, under what circumstances and how? So then I'll be sorting through that in the responses, and then coming to talk with the select board about what should we plan to think about doing next year.
And the survey can be done online for those.
Yes, it's closed now.
It's closed now.
Yeah, but, so I'm in a tabulating phase.
Right, Tom?
I'm Tom Tarpey, the outgoing chair of the Finance Committee. A week from tomorrow will be my last 15 minutes as chair, and Dean Banfield will be succeeding me, and thus will be taking command of the agenda from here on out. But I think over the last... Yes. Well, then, I mean, yes and no. I mean, one aspect in which it's not is I've really enjoyed sitting at this table over the last year. I've learned so much at these meetings, and the opportunity to sit here and ask questions of each of you on the many interesting things that are going on in the town has been a pleasure and a privilege. So I'm going to miss that.
You can watch some too.
It won't be the same. So Dean and I have worked very closely, Dean as vice chair and chair of the guidelines committee over the last year, and I don't think there will be too many shifts in emphasis in terms of our agenda. I think this next period between now and when we begin our guidelines process anew for fiscal 21, we will be talking at some length, I think, about the whole issue of a sustainable growth rate and expressing our feelings on that to the community. Beyond that, I really think there's not much I have to report.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
Oh, hi, Mark Hanson, I'm on the...
You need to come to the mic.
I've already given away what committee you're...
You see it on TV? They're right there. Anyway, very important. The Ponder Committee's been quite active. We're working on adding material to our website at the town to provide information of an educational nature for homeowners in Concord and landowners. This flyer we've been handing out at various places, and in fact I brought some if you'd like to pass those around. And that's also available on the website. This coming Saturday, May 18th, we will be participating at the Sustainable Landscaping Fair that CSEC is organized at the high school. I'd encourage you all to come. I think the hours are 10 to 2 p.m., 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll have a table there to encourage people, again, to reduce the amount of neonicotinoids they're using. We've talked about damaging effects of nicotinoids on the brains of teenagers here at the Board of Health. It has the same damaging effect on pollinators at very small levels. The other thing we've been doing is we're starting to work with neighboring towns on the same issue. And the third thing I wanted to share with you is that for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been trying to get a bill through the State House to reduce the level of neonicotinoids being sold over the counter, basically to eliminate that and to require people to be licensed to apply neonicotinoids. And we've failed. The state legislature has failed to produce a bill. A couple of years ago it was 2113, this year it's 4147, I think it is, House bill. Last year's bill was co-sponsored by 160 of the representatives in the legislature and supported by 100 scientists, and yet the bill failed. We need to do something in the State House to get a bill like this that is so widely supported. When Concord passed Article 48, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago in in 2016, it was nearly a unanimous vote. I think we need to do something at the state level to uncork the legislature, because the legislature has the ability to make a change that's beneficial to all of us, and particularly to pollinators. So anyway, I'd encourage anybody who's got any ideas on how we could get the leadership of the state legislature. Yeah, I would be delighted to take any input.
Mark, first of all, we might think about getting a letter that could be drafted and sent on behalf of the town. I'm going to be meeting with our representatives, Tammy and Mike, on some other issues. I'd be more than happy if you guys could draft something for the select board to deal with it.
You bet.
And then bring it up with them when I meet with them.
Okay.
We'll be talking with them primarily about affordable housing initiatives. You remember from town meeting that we passed a number of warrant articles, and 2 of those warrant articles need to go to the legislature for approval before they come back to the town. So if you would do that and get it to me, we'll do what we can. Mayor?
Also, a few years ago, I did some work before the legislature, and I think if you could get information on the impact of this to the staff. I found the staff people who, in my time, were, they were young parents, and our thing had to do with childcare facilities. They zeroed in on the issues. So stuff about this and the impact on families and children and the future, I think legislative staff would respond to, and you just have to be sure you get it in their hands, because they have a lot of influence on their members.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Both Tammy and Mike have excellent staff.
That's good. We've had, the bills have had favorable committee reviews, and you go to these hearings at the State House, and 100% favorable, and yet somehow behind the scenes, the one year it died in the Ways and Means Committee, or the last year it died in the Ways and Means Committee. The year before that it died in the Environment Committee. Basically, it just never makes it out of committee and never gets to the floor for a vote.
No open meeting law at the State House.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. This is an education. But I hope you come on Saturday to that meeting at the high school, and we'll also have some open gardens talking about how to do an organic lawn, etc.
Right, thanks. Jane? Rotating chairman.
It's not musical chairs, it's musical people. I'm Jean Goldsberry, the chair of the Concord Commission on Disabilities, and we are working on 2 major projects right now. One is providing lockboxes for Concord residents who have disabilities. The Council on Aging provides them for people who are aging, but there are plenty of younger people who we think may want to have a lockbox. So Chief Judge came to our meeting last week, the fire chief, and talked with us about what kinds of boxes they prefer, what's easiest for first responders, and it's a little bit more expensive box, but it's much more secure, both from the resident standpoint and the first responder standpoint. So we'll be disseminating information about providing those to citizens in Concord. And the other project that we are working on is a collaboration with the Acton Commission on Disabilities and some other groups in the area who are trying to promote an adaptive bike option for people. In fact, this Sunday, there will be an adaptive bike sort of demonstration, and people will be able to try out various adaptive bikes at Pedal Power. So they'll be able to try them right on the rail trail. It's possible Pedal Power will house the bikes, and then people can go there and either use them for free or a very, very small cost, so that folks who have disabilities are able to get out and enjoy biking either on the rail trail or wherever they would like to go. So those are the 2 big ones we're working on right now.
Gene, are you guys fully staffed now?
We have 1 opening. I will speak with you after the meeting about a concern.
Okay?
Okay.
And Mark, I didn't ask you, are you guys staffed up? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we're good.
All right, thanks, Gene.
And we do have green cards.
Yep, I'm sure you do.
Good morning. Yanis Tsitsas from Concord Housing Development Corporation. I would like to report that we're waiting to hear on Jackson Village, and we are very excited of the town meeting results as far as all the articles that have passed for the affordable housing. And we're looking forward to work with the rest of the town, the authorities, to see how we can have more affordable units.
To be honest, you guys fully staffed?
Well, we have 5 members right now. We're seeking, we would like to have a couple more because one of them, Barbara, will not be with us any longer. So hopefully if we can get a couple more people, it would be great.
Okay. Right, so what I'd like to do is give you a quick update on what's going on with the select board. I mentioned briefly that we've gotten the articles out for the transfer tax and for the building permit surcharge. Those have gone to our representatives, and I'll be meeting with them along with Linda Escobedo. The third article that requires action is the one that creates the trust committee. So when these other articles are in place and money begins to flow from the transfer tax or the building permit, it will come to the trust. And we have to decide who's going to manage that trust and what their responsibilities are going to be. And the select board right now is looking at 2 approaches to this. We've got some examples of what a trust committee would look like because other towns have done this. And we may go ahead with that, or we may create a small short-term committee to help us decide what that trust committee should look like if that's not too wound up. Who should be on it, what the responsibility should be, that kind of stuff.
Not the trustees of town donations?
Probably not. Probably not. But they have other responsibilities, so we just gave them some additional responsibilities with respect to some other fun stuff. So that's going on. We're in the process of defining our goals for the year. One of the ones that I know will be on there, which was driven by the Finance Committee last year, was trying to decide the best approach going forward with capital or facilities planning. As you might know, we passed a feasibility study article at town meeting for middle school. If that comes to pass, it's 90 million, we don't know exactly, but a lot. And also the town has got substantial needs for space for municipal operations. And so over the course of the next so many years, there's going to be a lot of capital and facilities planning. And the thinking coming out of the Finance Committee and the select board itself is we should get these laid out with some specificity, try to understand as much as we can the costs and benefits associated with them, so that if we're going to go ahead with them, we can think about staging so that the impact on taxes in town would not, jump up and grab us everything at a time. So exactly how we go forward with that, I'm not sure yet. We're going to start talking about it, and I've asked the superintendent of schools and the town's treasurer and the incoming chair of the finance committee to come meet with us on June 17th to sort of talk about that. So those are 2 things that are really on our plate right now that we need to address, Carla.
Mike, is it possible to take a look at the master plan? This is for all the planned capital ideas.
Well, that's the difference between yes, and the difference is manifest in language. When the finance committee wrote this, they talked about facilities planning. When the select board has been talking about it, they've been talking about capital planning. And so I think we need to resolve whether we're just talking about facilities or whether we're talking about broadly any capital expenditure that's bigger than the bread box, or I don't know what the word is there, but what some financial threshold that we would want to make sure gets in the plan.
Information technology.
Anything, a major roads project, anything that would be a significant, we might need to go to the taxpayers for some kind of bonding authority to do that. So those are 2 big items that are on our plate. The third is the, sort of Matt alluded to it, the Envision Concord plan, which has just got so much stuff in it, it's almost overwhelming. So we've been working for the last couple of months anyway on trying to get our hands around how we as a select board define those handful, I don't know exactly how many, but some handful of things that we really want to drive to make sure the town gets around it. And then, as indicated on other committees, each of these committees, NRC or Board of Health or Planning, whatever it is, has got initiatives that stem from a long-range plan. So making sure we're continuously knowledgeable about what's coming and trying to coordinate those are going to be interesting and perhaps a little challenging.
And when is the new town manager?
When is the new town manager? Don't know. Here's what, we're in the process now. I'm meeting with Linda Escobedo. She and I were designated by the select board as the two members to be the negotiating team, if you will. We are meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock with Amy Foley, the HR director of the town, to look at a draft contract. And as soon as we've looked at that, then it'll go out. We've gotten back the background report, the summary of the background report. The full report hasn't gotten here, so we should be able to move very quickly. I did meet with him, and I think he's ready to go. There's a lot of logistics in making that kind of a move because he lives kind of a long ways away. But hopefully soon. Chris's last day is this Friday. Tomorrow are two events. One, the staff of the town is having an event for him here in the house in the afternoon at 6 o'clock. We're having an event for Chris at the Tricon Church from 6 to 8. Everybody is invited to that, and then Chris goes on vacation, and Kate Hodges will be the acting town manager through the duration of Chris's contract, which ends at the end of June or the 1st of July, and hopefully we'll know what's going on by that time. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all very much for coming.